this is a demo that I have never seen, so please.
The demo is very short. The slides are a bit longer. Okay. Some people will remember we did an end user survey beginning of last year on how you test your software. And I've got some feedback from that. I've got the high level design of the test suite. I have a very brief demo of the test suite and then feedback and discussion, quite a bit of which I'm hoping we've already covered because we got into the test suite. So I had a testing survey and the questions come out, the questions are related to each of these bullets. So I'm not going to, basically each of these bullets summarizes the questions. So I haven't put the questions that we asked in here. We've got 9 full responses, 1 partial. I think the major response was that everyone does their testing differently. And this is testing of their software in general, not the CAPE-OPEN, not necessarily just the CAPE-OPEN implementations. Everybody's answers were different. Now, I'm not going to tell you what the answers were because quite a lot of them were provided in confidence. But I can tell you that they were all different. There was hardly any common ways of testing. Every company did it differently. And that includes the testing of the CAPE-OPEN implementations. Software testing in general was mostly a mixture of automated and manual, ranging from mostly manual with a little bit of automated to probably about 50-50, maybe even higher on the automated. Nobody reported that they did it all automated. Very few of those 10 people who responded said they did it all manually. It's a mixture of automation and manual. I think on the testing of CAPE-OPEN implementations, the response was manual. The frequency of testing of CAPE-OPEN implementations was very infrequent. People test when they implement it in the first place, and it very rarely gets tested thereafter unless it's actually physically changed. It's not done routinely because you've changed another bit of the code. And it's not clear if the testing that is done is all the way through a development cycle or whether it's just on a clean install of the final release candidate, which might really yield different results in both directions. For the automated testing, there was a long list of third-party tools, which I think some are designed purely for testing, others are designed for other things, but are used for automation and testing. I don't know any of these tools, so I don't know which ones are which. I think the ones that are pure testing are those first 5, and Jenkins, Cruise Control, and Final Builder are automation tools that allow you to do the testing. So that was the list of tools that were talked about in the responses. And each was only used by a limited number of vendors. There wasn't one of those that nearly everybody used. Each was used by 1, 2, maximum of 3, I think. The thing that was used by the highest proportion of vendors was the in-house tools. Therefore, if you want to automate the use of the CO-LaN test suite, you need a C++ or a C# interface. And there were a couple of comments around command line drivers would be required. So that's how people automate their testing. We then went on into questions around when would you use the test suite. Most would use the test suite during the development cycle if it was quick to run and could be integrated into any automated testing. Otherwise, it would be before beta or final release only. So making the test suite very simple to use and enabling it to be automated where automation is used is very important. The output report needs to be parsable, and there was a comment around N unit, X unit, J unit. I know nothing about any of those 3. And would we use certification? The answer was mostly yes, where there are currently maintained implementations. Some of the responses came from companies who have implementations, but they're not under maintenance. Therefore, certification is not that important to them. But there was a common thread that certification would only be applied for if there was a business case for it. So that is the feedback from the testing survey. which to my mind says, yes, we're going down a sensible route. Certification of his interest, the test suite is of interest. Automation, we have to be incredibly, allow the design to be flexible to allow automation to take place. And if we do all that, then we are providing a very powerful tool to the CO-LaN members. So that's the feedback from the survey. Moving on to the high-level design. The initial design is for process modeling components only. The extension to environments will follow, because to test an environment is a totally different challenge to testing a component. You can test a component by effectively writing a test suite that's a harness and running through a series of tests. To test an environment, the developer of the environment has got to actually step through a scenario that exercises their environment in the correct way using standard components provided by CO-LaN. So the two things are very different. And the initial work on the test suite is around process modeling components only. So this diagram is lifted straight from the design document. It's actually very simple. Basically, the test software sits here in the middle. The end user, the user of the test suite, I won't call them the end user, selects the tests that are going to be run via a GUI. They select the components that are going to be run via a GUI. And obviously you can test any component or combination of components if that is required, where, for example, you might be testing the interaction between a unit operation and a thermo component. So you might want to select both of them. And the test software will provide persistence of the configuration via the CAPE-OPEN persistence methods. So in concept, it is very simple. So running the test suite, the user of the test suite configures the components to be tested and selects the tests to be run. They run the test suite to execute those selected tests on the required components. And the test software provides the persistence of the configuration. That's just basically an encapsulation. That's just words around saying the same thing as that diagram. The architecture. And I hope this wording is okay, Jasper. And I'm expecting Jasper and Loic to butt in if I say anything that they don't agree with. There are no test-specific interfaces to be implemented in the component under test. You do not modify your component that you're testing. It is tested exactly as is. The test suite is built using CAPE-OPEN interfaces, and it's built based on COBIA, to answer the earlier comment. It starts with COBIA. It does not use COM. But that means in the current CAPE-OPEN world, it supports version 1.2, i.e. the COBIA version. It supports version 1.1 via COMBIA, and it supports version 1.0 via COMBIA. But note, it doesn't support Thermo version 1.0 because that has been deprecated. So that answers the earlier question. Yes, it will absolutely support COBIA. In fact, it is built on COBIA and it is supporting COM via COMBIA. How do we integrate into automated testing? The design, and I'm putting this in words and I'm not totally, I find I'm struggling to fully understand this, so excuse me if I get anything wrong here. But the test suite is split into a test host, which is basically the user interface, and a test engine, which handles the execution of the tests. And the communication between the two is handled via the test engine interface, which is open and extensible. So basically, the test host is not CO-LaN defined. We will provide some, but the software developers can write their own test host to communicate with the test engine via the test engine interface. And hence you can integrate the test engine into any other third-party tools by writing a new test host. And then we come back to those survey results. Which are the important ones for CO-LaN to provide? since there was so little commonality in the tools that are being used for automated testing. But in principle, you can integrate the test suite into any third-party environment you want to. Integration into in-house tools, directly using that test engine interface, you can integrate into C++. There is currently no .NET binding for Cobia, so you can't integrate into C# is my understanding. But that will come in the future as soon as the .NET binding for Cobia has been implemented, which I believe is on the roadmap. So tests, which comes back to the earlier comments. We will have the compliance tests for a thermo PMC, say, or a unit PMC. And these will be all the tests that are needed to be run for a request for certification to be submitted. This is the next comment is almost an aside. Not all those tests may need to be passed for a specific PMC. If you've got a thermo PMC for which a specific test, for which a test is irrelevant, it will say fail. But that is a discussion between the CCO and the software developer. If a test that is normally required for a thermo PMC for certification is irrelevant, then a fail is not a reason for not granting the certificate. Then within the compliance tests, they will be split up into test categories, which are groups of tests that need a similar setup and similar data, and I'll show you an example of that in the demo. And then obviously within those test categories, we have the individual tests. And Jasper just put a comment up that appeared on my screen and disappeared so rapidly I can't see what it was.
I pointed out that you mentioned the GUI 2 slides ago. I pointed out that the GUI is just required for the configuration part. Once the configuration is saved, the test can run without any user interaction.
Yes, thank you. Good clarification, thank you. Okay, so the provision of those tests. CO-LaN provides the tests for compliancy, and they will be defined, as I've already said, by the relevant SIG. And they will either succeed or fail with an error message. Now, under the current proposal where we only provide the binaries, the test suite users will have no direct access to the internal details of the tests. They'll only see the interface definition, the configuration requirements, and the success failure information. Doesn't mean to say that a description of the test will not be published as a document, but you will not be able to see the exact definition of the tests in the software. Obviously, that will change if we provide the source code. And it will be the software, sorry, I'm seeing comments popping up again from Jasper. The software developer themselves will be able to develop their own tests and add their own tests. So if you disagree with a test, you could write a different version of the test and check it and then report it back to the CCO. Or if you want to test something that's not part of the compliance testing, but you want to test it as part of your standard automated testing, you can write the tests. That will be supported by the design of the test suite. But how we actually define the details of the tests is still to be determined. For reports, the test suite provides a programmatic interface which allows any test host to process the test messages, any test failures, and the details of the past tests as required. So you can produce a report in any format you like using that programmatic interface. Currently, within our prototype, we have a simple text output for reporting in a console and for continuous integration tests if you're automating, and a JSON format text file. But obviously, because we've got the programmatic interface, we can add other formats in the future, and the users can add additional formats. And we've already had the discussion, the prototype does not protect the results file in any way. And I've put there future discussion. I think we've already been having that discussion. Does it need to be protected? So with that, I am going to dive into I'm going to attempt to do a live demo. which is going to be fun because, yeah, I've not done this sort of thing for a good few years. But the prototype, the current status, it has a command. The test host for the prototype is a command line interface. It allows testing of the property packages, but not a property package manager. And we've implemented some very basic tests. There is no example of a test that needs data, for example, a temperature-dependent property. That has not been done yet, and it's certainly not the full set of tests for testing compliancy. But persistence has been implemented. So, if everybody can now see that, that is, well, let me go back a little bit further. Let me show you, I've installed the test suite prototype on my laptop, and it's WebEx is getting to me, it's going on a go slow. That is the installed files for the test suite. You've got the test engine DLL sitting in program files, and you've got the test you've got the test categories, each of them in a separate DLL, and that is how you will be adding in your user tests. You'll see a separate DLL for your user tests when they've been created. Then if I go and find this window, anyway, from where I run the test suite, the COTS-CLI.exe is my command line test host, which is completely independent from the test engine. Hence it's in a separate folder. So if I now bring back that window, I bring that one up, and the first thing, that command line interface has, and I just did the wrong thing, I wanted Control-C, Control-V, has a help functionality. And I can immediately see all the commands I can run on that command line interface. That's just for information, really. I can find out what version of the test suite I'm running. So I'm running the command line test host version 0.1, and I'm running the test suite engine 0.1. They're both prototypes, so we haven't got to 1.0 yet. I can see which test categories have been implemented. Sorry. I can see which compliance tests have been implemented. So we have compliance tests here for the property package and property package only. So we have nothing for a property manager. We have nothing for a unit operation. I can see which test categories I've got implemented. Primary PMC, which are the interfaces required for every PMC, and a set of interfaces that are required for the property package. And I can see the tests that have been implemented. There we go. We've got 4 under primary PMC, and these are testing those interfaces. So we've got some that are testing interfaces required for every PMC, and some testing the basic interfaces for a property package. Now, how do I actually edit the input to my test suite? And if I run that command, the edit command on my command line somewhere, says he, hopefully, there it comes up on my other screen. I'll have to pull it across. There we go. A simple little interface. So I can give it an ID. I can, at this moment, it says thermo package or unit PMC. Obviously, I can only test the thermo package. I have 3 packages installed on this machine, but only T is current. The other 2 are out of date, don't have licenses. But if you had multiple current property packages, they would, thermo PMCs, they would all appear here. So I'm going to use T. I've installed Cocoa on this machine. I can see all the standard property packages available within T. Water is free, no license is required. I don't have it on. I don't know where I've got it from. It's not installed properly on this machine, obviously. But I can select any of the packages, property packages that have been created by default in T, and if I create a new one, it will be available. I'm going to run the compliancy tests under property package, and I'm going to run all of those tests that I showed you in the command window just now. So that's that. And if I configure PMC, it saves, oh no, that's me actually going into the PMC for T, the interface for T itself. So I could change things there, which I don't want to do. So I OK that. That is saved. And I'm ready to run. Again, the run command is the command line. And it ran in very quickly. So it tells me which version of the test engine I was running, tells me when I ran it, date and time. It tells me what the config file was, which is the file I created from the edit. It tells me I'm testing the property package. Oh, it doesn't tell me which property package I'm testing. It tells me which property package manager I'm testing. But then it runs through the tests from both primary PMC and property package and tells me they're all okay. So it tells me I've executed 11 tests, 11 passed, 0 failed, and wrote the results to a JSON file. I'll now go back to there and open the JSON file, and hopefully I've got it set up so it opens Notepad. Yes, I have. And there is the full information in the JSON file, which in the fullness of time will become the compliancy report, which gets sent to the CCO. And obviously we'll have a lot more information in it about on more sophisticated testing of more complex interfaces. These are all very simple interfaces, so it just tells me test failed or test. It says test failed, false, so it's passed. If it says true, it's failed. So that basically is the demo. That is where we've got to. But I believe, Loic, could you comment on how easy it is to add new tests to this system? Putting him on the spot. I don't even know if he's actually sitting there listening.
I'm sitting here and I'm listening.
I thought you were. I was hoping you were.
It's very easy. It's really easy. It's basically just a. I mean, if you have a skeleton of tests, it's just a copy paste and half an hour to add something like 10 tests. So it was really easy. Half an hour, considering that I was new to the code and to understanding the new structure. So really easy.
Thank you, Loic. That was what the information. You said that in an email to me, and I thought it was best if you said that to everybody. Okay.
You're welcome.
So that's the demo. So what are the next steps? In 2021, we must implement further tests that demonstrate, for example, setting the temperature on a temperature-dependent property. And the idea is that a minimal edit, when you set the temperature for the first time, a minimal editing window will appear, and you will put in the temperature, and it will then get persisted. So you don't have to put it in again if you want to use the same temperature every time. So we have to implement further tests to make this prototype usable and reviewable by anybody else. We need to complete any other outstanding features necessary to demonstrate the full workflow and the functionality. So it doesn't take us to full compliancy testing, but make sure that the prototype has enough features in it so anybody can use it and do effectively what I've just done and make sure it meets their requirements. And we will then plan to provide it to selected or volunteer CO-LaN members for review. Don't think we would put it on general distribution, but given it's PMC, it's thermo PMC only, and I suspect some of those on this call meeting will have particular interest in that and may be interested in reviewing what we've done so far before we proceed. In 2022, we will extend it to the Property Package Manager fully. We'll allow additional software developer tests so you can add your own tests. The ThermoSig will need to define what the compliancy tests are for the property packages, and all of those tests will need to be implemented in the test suite. And we will modify the design implementation based on the CO-LaN member review we request in 2021. So the plan by the end of 2022, at a minimum, is that we have a test suite that can be used for compliancy testing for property packages. And with that, I want to thank our development contractors, Marcus, Loic and Jasper, for all their work on this. Made some excellent progress in the last 6 months. Thank you very much. And open up for feedback and discussion. So feedback on the design and the current prototype. Is this what you were expecting from the test suite? If not, without having reviewed it, having just seen what I've talked about and demoed today, and if it's not, what should be different? And is there anybody out there interested in volunteering to review the prototype? So over to everybody else. Michelle, are you going to manage the conversation again?
I guess so, yeah.